And so I think those three areas are the thing that stand in the way: beliefs, knowledge, and actions.
You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
Alrighty, welcome back. Another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, episode 144. Jace, what's going on, man? How are you? We just had a few interviews here.
Yeah, no, we continue to get some new guests and some new professions, new states. We're, midsummer here. I think things are trucking along. We're still in the middle of the pandemic, but I think some things are starting to get a little bit better. We had an interview with a guy recently in New Zealand, and they're pretty much back to normal. We'll be releasing that episode later this year, but it's been a crazy time. And I think, as we've talked with, some of these millionaires about their portfolios in the last few months, it's been kind of insightful for us to discuss that with them. What's changed, what they did differently, if they did anything differently. And, it's been a great little few months for us.
Yeah, totally. So today we just had an interview with a female nurse. She was a great episode, had a net worth of about 650, so well on her way. Also just interviewed a guy whose father tragically or sadly, right, passed away when he was just 30, and he inherited some money, and he's just got a really great perspective, right? It took a year after he got the money to say, hey, what should I do with this? Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I don't want to go blow it all. I don't want to go put it in the wrong place. So what should I do with it? So some really cool, really great interviews coming up. And I mean, on the side note, something we were talking about earlier is, and that's come up frequently, I guess. Let me just backtrack a little bit. Another guy that we interviewed recently has a net worth of over $6 million, and he has over $2 million in his 401k, right?
Yeah, it's nearly $3 million.
Yeah, 2.9, right? And so, you found this article on CNBC that talks about the 401ks and how much money people need. And if you scroll down, this is just on CNBC, it's titled, "For most Americans, 1.7 million is the magic retirement number." But if you scroll down, it has average 401k balance by age. And this guy's 59, right? 58, 59, I think. He just retired. 57, right? He just retired. 2.9 million in his 401k. The average 401k balance for ages 50 to 59 is 174,000. So pretty amazing. Average 401k balance for 20 to 29 is just shy of 12,000, 30 to 39, 42,000, 40 to 49, 100 grand, and over 60, 195. So it's a pretty interesting article, right? And I think that's a question that is being talked about more often. But previously, the question of, hey, how much do I need to retire? I think that was hard for a lot of people, and probably still is, to find an answer to that.
Yeah, you bring up a great point in trying to figure out how much to have, when to retire. We've got this whole movement of retire early, that's going on, and maybe this pandemic's pushed some of that back for some people. But you mentioned that article, and I also came across another one on Bloomberg this week that talks about, 401k plans no longer make so much sense. And it went back into the history of when the 401k, became available, and what the federal marginal tax rates looked like back then, the capital gains rates, and likely retirement brackets and everything else, and where the interest rates were around, which is really shocking. I mean, 1980, they were around 15%. Today, we're like near zero. And, the whole premise of the article was that it doesn't make as much sense. Back then, tax deferral, you basically got an equivalent of almost a 9% return just by deferring, some of that income, whereas today it's a whole different story. So, I think these articles are great, and they paint pictures, for us to think about. I think back to the one you just mentioned, that millionaire we just mentioned, and the guy's, he just retired. He's in his 50s. He's got a very well diversified portfolio, worked a corporate job, for majority of his life. And it's pretty remarkable to look at his portfolio, somebody who's gone through it all, and look at the diversification and the options he has in terms of taking his income and how he takes his income. And, the more and more millionaires that we interview, I think a lot of them are on that track. And as we get closer to those ones that are, at the 50s and 60s, we'll see that for the most part, a lot of them have some sort of diversification, even if it's in one asset class. The guy in New Zealand's primarily been in all sorts of different asset classes over his career. And these other ones that we have coming up, many of them will be in one to two asset classes for the most part, but they'll start to expand their portfolio over time.
Yeah, exactly. And even some of the people that we've talked to that are in real estate heavily or 100%, right? They say, hey, I own real estate, all types of real estate, first of all, right? Whether it's single family, multi, and then in different locations. And they're like, it's not fair to say I'm not diversified, right? Because every market's different. So anyway, just a fun thing. If I think we've talked about this on the show before, Jace, but one thing I know we've both done in to kind of back into our number of how much we need, we both sat down and said, okay, if I was doing everything I knew I wanted to, right? How much do I need? So how often am I going to buy a new car? Is my house paid off? How much am I going to spend on food? How much am I going to spend on golf? How much am I going to spend on travel? How much am I going to spend on vacations? How much am I going to spend taking my kids on vacations or whatever it is, right? If you go through and make that list, you come up with a number. And, it takes you 20 minutes, right? 15 minutes to think through things and property taxes and everything. And then from there you say, okay, right, I need 50,000, I need 100,000, I need 300,000, whatever it is. And then you can back into how do you want to get there. And I think that's a good exercise, especially if you're trying to build streams of passive income, right? Then you know exactly how much you need to live the life you want to live.
Yeah. And just while we're on the topic, you and I went through this exercise, a year and a half ago, and trying to build this. And I think for me, it changes every year, even though I went and did it, at my 30 years old. Have another kid and my portfolio adjusts and I look out and working backwards, like it changed. Did it change for you at all when you think about yours? Or are you still pretty set?
Yeah, we just did it. So my wife and I were driving this last weekend and we just did it. She hadn't done it before. And so we just talked through it, and it's interesting. And yeah, I mean, it could go up, right? If you have kids, but mine went down a little bit because I'm like, I don't, the lavish things I think I wanted, I don't need it. After a while, you start to say, look, I value the time and the flexibility more than I do the money.
Yeah.
So I think as we learn and we grow, we start to change a little bit. Right. And certainly we do as we talk to all these millionaires. And the common thing is I want time. I want flexibility. I want freedom to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. So that it changed. It came down a little bit for me. And who knows, maybe it'll go back up when I get my pilot's license that my wife won't let me get. But we'll see. So we got a fun interview this week with Chris Hogan. So guest interview today. He has graciously given us 3 copies of his book. So 2 copies of his new book, Everyday Millionaires, and 1 copy of Retire Inspired. So if you want to enter the drawing for that, just shoot us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com, and we'll just pick people at random after the first week or so of this episode going out. So again, Chris Hogan, that's 2 copies of Everyday Millionaires, 1 copy of his first book, Retire Inspired. So just shoot us an email if you want to enter that giveaway, and we'll mail them out to you. So great interview with Chris. We talked to him about insurance. We talked to him about the mutual fund categories that he and Dave Ramsey recommend. So really good to have Chris back on the show. He was on what, Jace, 2 years ago-ish, maybe almost now. So
yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, fun to have him back on. Last week's episode, if you missed that, 143, we had Randy. One of the most interesting things is he said he bought Tesla at $34 and he bought Apple as a young kid. So he's been able to really grow those holdings and also invest in some real estate along the way. So great interview last week, great interview this week with Chris, and some fun interviews coming up. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on any platform that you listen to. It helps us grow the show and reach new interviewees. So without any further today, please help me welcome Chris to the show.
Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, guys. Good to be back with you.
Hey, appreciate you coming on again. So last time we had you on, your book had just launched. Tell us a little bit about the book tour and all the people that you got to meet going on that tour.
Man, I can tell you this. We did almost a 4-week book tour all around the country. We started up in New York and finished out in California. It was absolutely amazing to get out to see people in the book signings and to meet people and to spread the message. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work. It felt like Groundhog Day, where you wake up and you do radio, you do TV, you do signings, you do events. But I tell you, it was an absolute blast.
Totally. So, Millionaire, we talk about it on our show. You wrote a book about it. Your study consisted of over 10,000 millionaires. You talk about retirement being a financial number. I know you had the retirement quotient calculator. We always talk about, is 1 million enough anymore? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, if you're following my plan, $1 million should be more than enough. Right. But it depends on where people are financially and what their goals are and what lifestyle looks like. So you all know I'm allergic to debt. So I want people to get themselves out of debt, have an emergency fund, and be investing and having that money continue to grow. But is $1 million enough? It depends. You know, I'm talking to some people that want to travel, you know, a couple of times a month abroad, versus someone that might want to, you know, travel once a quarter. So it depends on lifestyle. And I think the goal is, as we all know, is not to just get to $1 million, but to keep investing and growing that money.
Totally. So what do you think holds people back from getting to that point where they're able to kind of take advantage of compounded interest and investing and to grow, you know, that portfolio, if you will, that they're able to get to that point where they can retire and maybe travel twice a month?
Yeah. Well, I think there's 3 things holding people back, to be honest. Those 3 things are beliefs, knowledge, and actions. The belief side is really believing that you can do this, right? And I can remember growing up in Kentucky, you know, little country boy. I didn't know millionaires. I didn't know what that was. I thought you had to be a pro athlete, an entertainer, or someone to be able to reach that status. But then regardless of where you grew up or where you went to school, believing that you can do it. The next one is knowledge. And this is where we have to grow our knowledge about money. There's so many nuances out there. There's so many terms and so many things we have to be learning consistently. And then finally, actions, the things that we end up doing. Are we budgeting? Are we attacking debt? Are we saving? And are we investing? And so I think those 3 areas are the thing that stand in the way: beliefs, knowledge, and actions.
Yeah, it's a good answer. And of all the people that we've interviewed, the millionaires, we've interviewed about 150 millionaires now, are heavy on education and personal development and learning, right? Even the people that are worth 100 million, we had a guy on worth 100, he's pushing himself to learn, right? And so it's something we're seeing from all of our guests, regardless of if they're at 500,000, a million, or 100 million. That's something that's,
I mean, and I can tell you guys this, so that, you know, I've talked to several billionaires and they're cut from the same cloth. And so there's something to the mindset of wanting to grow, wanting to learn, but also being aware. I think too often times in our society, we try to complicate the simple, right? We want to make things sophisticated and make things more complicated than they need to be. And if you've ever read the book, The Tortoise and the Hare, right? The tortoise wins. And because the hare gets distracted, gets off the plan, starts trying to do 9 different other things, where the tortoise is just focused and steady. And so I think there's a lesson inside of that kid story for us, even as adults.
Yeah, totally agree. And we should have mentioned at the beginning of the show, Chris was kind enough to provide 2 copies of his new book, Everyday Millionaires, and then 1 Retire Inspired. So if you listen to the intro, you did listen to the intro for this show, then you know how to entry for those. So Chris, thanks again for donating those.
You're very welcome.
So you mentioned debt, right? I want to ask you about real estate debt, right? Because I know Dave, and I'm sure you are too big on not taking out debt for real estate, right? Dave always says, hey, if you're going to buy real estate, buy it in cash. Is real estate bad debt? Is that what you recommend? What if somebody wants to, you know, if they're living in a house and they want to turn their primary residence into a rental? Is that something, should they do that? Is it bad debt?
Well, you know, the only time you'll hear me or Dave talk about it being okay to take on debt is for a mortgage. And even inside of that, we tell people a 15-year fixed rate mortgage for your primary residence. But, you know, guys, listen, I've gone to grad school. I've heard the terms OPM, other people's money, the topic of leveraging, right? Using other people's money to do this and that. And what I've learned throughout my years of doing stupid with money is that debt brings risk. And in the middle of this COVID-19 thing that we're all experiencing right now, risk is something that people are feeling the crunch of. And so because of this, even for real estate, even for business, I'm going to tell people you got to see debt for what it is. And interest that you pay is a penalty. Interest that you earn is a reward. When you use someone else's money, you're charged a penalty called interest. And so people will try to debate with me, you know, about using debt for investing and all these things. And I'm okay with them being wrong. I really am, because the reality is debt brings risk. Now, I've got friends, I've got people that I know that I'm close to that will use debt. They are, they're juggling and doing that. But I'm going to tell you, the crunch right now during the COVID-19 has really shown what I know to be true, and is that debt is a threat. It's a threat to your mental peace. It's a threat to your relationships. It's a threat to your just overall well-being. So I encourage people to stay allergic to it. Even for an investment property, save up, pay cash. I know it's slower. I know it's going to take longer, but I know there's no risk involved, because here's the deal, fellas. I've never heard of a foreclosure on a paid for piece of property, right? You never hear of that. And so it's all about a mindset and being clear on your mission and your goal.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely taking some risk, right? You're borrowing money. So
that's right.
Totally with you there. And we've had people, I mean, Jay's correct me if I'm wrong. I think 5 or so people that were primarily invested in real estate who lost it all in 2008 and 2009, and okay, the ones we've talked to have been able to build it up, but there's plenty out there that haven't.
Oh, yeah. And here's the thing. I've talked to many. I've coached probably close to 40, 50,000 people in my career. People that have started off with debt, and then they see it for what it is, and they've been intentional about trying to whittle it down and pay it off. And to me, that's the way to go. I don't want people listening to your show thinking, oh, my gosh, I've taken on this debt for this investment property. There's no fix for me. No, that's not true. But seeing it for what it is and understanding that all it does, debt just it requires a payment. It doesn't care if your family gets sick. It doesn't care about the economy. It doesn't even care about the COVID. Debt wants its payment. And so I want people to see that for what it is and really start to get intentional on paying it down and then eventually paying it off, because there's no better feeling than a paid for piece of real estate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's talk COVID. You mentioned COVID here. And you guys are big, right? 3 to 6 months of emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough now? During COVID, if somebody had just 3 months, now they're getting the stimulus checks, right? And then you have the $1,200, you have the unemployment if you lost a job or got furloughed. But should they have more now, 3 to 6 months?
Well, I'm going to tell you, this COVID-19 has thrown a shock into everything. And I've heard the most awakening about having an emergency fund. People that said, I didn't have it, and now I get it. Now I see the benefit of that, versus the people that have had it in place, whether it was a 3 or 6 month emergency fund. If you had that in place, as we sit here on like month 3.5 of this situation, you're okay. It doesn't mean you're not stressed and you're not worried about someone else's health or your family's health, but financially, your world hasn't been rocked. And if you didn't have it, what you felt is the severe crunch. So I'm going to stand beside what we've been teaching people for years. I think 3 to 6 is good. I think anytime you have someone that's self-employed or has volatile income, a 6 month is a safer bet. Just because you do have those peaks and valleys and things that can happen. But I don't want people to go overboard. I don't think you should have a 12-month emergency fund. And I say that because I know full well people, have consumer debt in their lives. So I want them to get out of debt, attack debt, and then start to build up the emergency fund.
Yeah, it's a good answer. So I was looking, another piece of this, and Jason and I were talking, is in retirement. Jace asked, right, is $1 million enough? But then also, you often hear, hey, I'm going to have Social Security when I retire, right? And so I was looking on your site just before this, and you have this Everyday Millionaires Investing Guide, right? You can get it at chrishogan360.com. And you have this blurb halfway through. It says, because Social Security won't replace your income, right? And you say the average benefit is about $1,300 a month or $16,000 a year. So even if it's there, which we can discuss if it will be there for millennials, right? It's still not probably going to be enough.
Oh, it's not. And I'm going to tell you guys something. That was probably the beginning of the wake up call for me as I was coaching people in 2011 and 2012. So many people were telling me that Social Security was going to save the day. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, wait a minute, like you pay into it and you get out a portion of that. Right. And right now that payout is it's below the poverty line. And so if that's all you're going to be relying on, it alarmed me, because you've got the typical mortgage payment hovering around $1,100 a month. The typical new car payment's $575 a month, and the typical used car payment's around $450. So I'm looking at this and looking at the average Social Security payout going, if you are normal right now in the United States with a mortgage, a car payment, and credit card payments, Social Security is not going to pay all that. And so I wanted people to hear that. So here's my thought. I've done research and I read up on it, and Social Security is to become insolvent around 2034, 2033 is the prediction right now. I'm telling people, number one, don't count on it. Like I call it in my first book, Retire Inspired. It can be the icing on the cake, but please, for the sake of your financial future, don't let it be the cake, the only thing you're relying on, because there's no doubt it could not be there, regardless of what you paid into it. So I want people to prepare for themselves. You know, I know this, the government can't count. Okay. You guys know it as well as I do. They don't know how to count. That's why our deficit is where it is. And they'll continue to do these things that don't make sense because they don't know how to plan. They don't know how to say no to things. And so we've got to be prepared for ourselves, each and every one of our households having a savings plan, an investing plan, and a plan for our future.
Yeah. Yeah. With you there. So you mentioned Retire Inspired. And one of the things that stood out to us of all those that have either A, retired early, or B, retired, I guess, later, if you want to call it that, right, is healthcare. How do people go about it? And maybe you've written about your book, and I can't remember if we asked you about this last time, but I mean, it's a real concern for people that retire, right? Is the cost of healthcare and knowing where it's going to be in the future. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, the healthcare is the wild card. To be honest, and not knowing the direction we're going or what's going to be available. So I'm encouraging people to sit down with an insurance professional, have that discussion, understand the benefits that you have available to you at the current job that you're on, but start to think about what does that look like as you get toward retirement? Are you looking at a COBRA situation, which can be expensive, but there are other plans out there that you can do as well. But I'm encouraging people to do the wellness checkups right now. Like, we got to be as intentional about our health as we need to be with our money. And so taking advantage of those checkups, being intentional about follow-up appointments. But healthcare is a wild card. And I think, you know, the best thing you could do is to get yourself to a debt-free standpoint, have some money invested. So hopefully you're able to cash flow some of those expenses. And then at the same time, but at 59 and a half, please get long-term care insurance in place. This is something that can be extremely expensive once you get into your 60s, and it can eat through a nest egg if you were to become incapacitated or needed assisted living. And so this is a matter of just having our eyes wide open and understanding there are a lot of question marks and some things we can't control, but we can control how we invest. We can control about being intentional with our money right now.
Yeah. And then one follow-up to that, insurance, disability insurance. I know this is a little bit outside of what we're talking about on the show, but when you look at it, it's really expensive, right? How should someone have it? And how much? Because it's uber expensive compared to life insurance.
Yeah, it can be very expensive. And as you look at it, the long-term disability is the thing that I advise people to look at. The short-term disability, not so much, because if you have the emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, then you can have that covered. But the long-term is something you definitely want to look at, whether you have that with your employer or getting it outside of there, just to make sure you're protected. But in the book, Retire Inspired, I talk about it's important to play offense as well as defense. The offense is budgeting and investing and being intentional. The defensive side is the insurances, life insurance, telling people to have 10 to 12 times your annual income in life insurance coverage. And if you have a spouse that's working inside the home, making sure you have coverage on them as well, but as well as the disability, as well as so on and so forth, the health, the life insurance, the automobile, homeowners. These things are really important. And so if you've got questions on that, go to my website, chrishogan360.com. I've got several articles in there talking about the insurance coverages you need.
Chris, while we're on this subject, talking about insurances and playing offense and defense, does somebody need an HSA? And how do they maybe utilize an HSA, whether invested or not, if they're not utilizing those dollars and spending it every year? Can that be something that they use for their long-term healthcare plan?
They sure can. Now, an HSA is a health savings account. So what it allows you to do is to really be able to put money aside, to be able to pay for your health needs now, but it also allows you an opportunity to be able to build up those funds for later. And so if this is something that's offered through your company, I want you to talk to your benefits provider. Again, it's an HSA, which is a health savings account, and really sit down and talk about that, the benefits of it and how to go about it. But it can be an additional tool to help you build up money for the future.
How does that fit into the baby steps that y'all teach there at Ramsey Solutions?
Well, I mean, in the baby steps, we tend to talk about the 7 steps you need to take to get yourself to a position of being financially independent. The insurances are just the wills. There are a few things you want to get done at the front end, meaning you want to make sure that you've got health insurance. You want to make sure you have life insurance. We encourage people to get term life insurance, 10 to 12 times your income. And I want you to get that outside of your job, okay? Because if you lose or leave that job, then you could lose your life insurance. So get that outside of your job. That way you've got that taken care of, and you've got to have a will. The will is to make sure that you are the person in charge of your financial future and estate, not leaving it up to the state to make a decision. Almost 75% of Americans don't have a will. So that means if they die without a will, it's called dying intestate. Right? That's a $20 word. The bottom line is the state, your local state, will make a decision about your stuff. So get a will in place, make sure you get health insurance in place, and please, please, please get life insurance in place as soon as possible.
And as somebody's working through the baby steps, getting out of debt, do you encourage them to still contribute to an HSA along that journey, or get out of debt first, or where does that kind of fit?
Well, again, that's the HSA. That's a good question. Even if someone's working through baby step 2, trying to attack debt, the HSA, this is your health insurance coverage. So this is something you're going to get in place and have that. You're going to have money deducted from your check, just like you would for a standard health plan each and every month. So the HSA would be something that would be at the top of the list to get it done if it's available to you, because we're not calling it an investment. It's primarily insurance.
And do you encourage people, as that balance grows, to invest it in the market for long-term planning, or do you just keep that in cash?
Yeah, I think, definitely as you get to end of year and it's not money that you've used for your health or used for your family, then you've got an opportunity to be able to invest that, which is a great option.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit more, here and now with what the pandemic and people are facing. If somebody's furloughed or if they're worried about losing their job, what are some things and action items that they can take right now financially to kind of maybe secure themselves, for what might take place in the future here?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had a lot of people that have been furloughed or have lost their jobs. And if you are one of those people and you're worried about that happening, a couple of action steps I'd encourage you to do. First and foremost is talk to your employer. Let's have a direct conversation about your job and the stability of your job so you can know what you're dealing with. Fear is a real thing, but fretting over something where we could have a conversation to find out it's wasted energy. So have a conversation, find out about your position, and if it is something that is on the edge that might be lost, I would encourage you to go into conserve mode immediately. This is something I've been talking about over the last few months. And conserve mode means I'm going to cut out all unnecessary spending. I'm going to be very intentional with my budget. I'm going to cut out unnecessary subscriptions. The gym memberships, the gyms that aren't open, shut that down. That's money that's saved. I'm going to not buy food unnecessarily and eat the food that I have in my pantry and begin to meal plan. But I want to be really, really smart about it. And that's where you start to really protect what you have. And if it's someone that has lost their job or been furloughed, you're not able to work the baby steps right now. Right now, what you're doing is going in conserve and protect mode, which means you're going to pile up every extra dollar you can right now until you secure another job. And then once your income is stable, then you can go back to working the baby steps. So we just want to be really intentional right now and be very smart. If you are hearing that you're going to be furloughed, you need to reach out to your peers, coworkers, or friends and let them know that, hey, I'm going to be looking for employment. And, Ken Coleman, one of my friends here, he's got the Ken Coleman Show, and he's really been digging into this and helping people with their careers and with job changes right now. So they can definitely tune into the Ken Coleman Show if they need more guidance there.
Yeah, and I think it's good to watch it even if you haven't been furloughed or maybe don't think you will, right? I mean, I've either seen on LinkedIn or talked to people who think, hey, I'm going to be okay. Something happens as a surprise. Maybe it's good to just build up the emergency fund from 3 to 6 if you can right now, just in case, right?
Listen to me. The emergency fund is no longer optional in my mind. Right? It is an absolute essential. And I don't care where you are financially, having that cushion between you and life, right, is essential. Like, for example, I have a couple of friends that worked at Disney. This is Disney, right? These guys were upper level. They'd been there a while. They never dreamed that they would have been laid off or furloughed. And guess what? Even though they'd been there 10 years plus, they were laid off and furloughed, right? And this is Disney. This is something you think is never going to close. And see, this is the kind of unexpected thing that the emergency fund can be there for. Now, my friends will go back to work eventually, but hey, in the middle of that layoff or that furlough, you still have bills to pay, kids to feed, and things to do. So don't put your life at risk financially by not having this emergency fund. It's a wake-up call, and you have to have it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. You start thinking you work for a big company and you're safe, right?
Yeah, and it's a false sense of security.
Yeah.
I just, and this has been the biggest awakening. I'm going to tell you guys, in all the media that I do, talking about that emergency fund and helping people see that, that could be really an awakening coming out of all this COVID, where people begin to have more of that nest egg for themselves for the future.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, Chris, but I just want to ask you one thing. I'm going to push you a little bit here. So your guys, the 4 mutual funds invest, right? Growth, or 4 mutual fund categories: growth and income, aggressive growth, and international. As I look at international, right, I looked at it since like 97, it's a 4% return, right? And I look at that and I'm like, I don't want 25%. I mean, do I think there's years that it can beat it? Of course, right? Of course there will be. But is international really going to beat a domestic return over the next 40 years?
You know what? That is a great question. And Dave and I have actually sat down and not only talked about it, we have dug into this and talked to a lot of investing professionals. And looking at the international, it has underperformed. It really has. But when you begin to look at the other thing that you might use to replace that international fund, whether you're looking at a REIT, right, or ETFs or things of that nature, what you end up doing is you start to think, okay, well, what is the other potential downside? Like, if I've got one thing underperforming and other things that are performing or overperforming, is there something better? And after really digging into that and walking through it, the REITs aren't the way to go. We all know right now with the COVID-19 and the real estate situation on the commercial side, where people are working different, that landscape could look a lot different over the next 3 to 5 years. Right. And with ETFs, I mean, they're cousin to a mutual fund. The problem is ETFs are traded daily like stocks. So you've got the expenses on it and the ratios that are higher. So in the long run, what we came back to was looking at it and going, okay, what is the play of that, right? What is the goal of the international? It's not to be a quick hit. It's not a single stock. The goal is for it to be able to perform over a 5-year or more margin. And so we're looking at it, and I agree with you. It has underperformed. No one is even doubting that. The key is the prediction is what is it going to do coming back now? And so as we become more and more of a global marketplace, and we've seen I think that there's a potential for it to come back over the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, you have so many companies now that are so global, but then you have other ones, right? Airbus, Nestle, right? Big companies that are global.
But still, guys, the beauty of it is the whole point is being diversified. So having growth, aggressive growth, what you're doing is I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket, but I am watching this international basket going, you better start doing a little bit better. I'll have to shake you up a little bit.
Right. So just in closing here, Chris, tell us what you're up to now, maybe what you're excited about, where people can find you. Obviously, you have the website, the show, Everyday Millionaires, the new book, but where can people get in contact with you?
Well, they can get in contact with me at chrishogan360.com. That's chrishogan360.com. And I'm having a blast right now with the Chris Hogan Show and, really working through some pivots right now. I can't get out and do speaking events right now. So really working on a lot of webinars. Doing a lot of trainings for companies and individuals out there. So if people are interested, they can email me, ask@chrishogan360.com. We'd love to talk to them.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Everybody, again, that's Chris Hogan.
Thank you, my friend. It was good to be with you guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Chase Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.